Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rotoworld Football Show. Normally, you'd be getting this greeting from Patrick Daugherty, but both he and Denny Carter have finally decided to meet in person, pistols in hand, and duel things out with the lawyers there, of course. That is really what's going on, is the final firing, maybe, we'll see, depending on how the lawyers do, the final firing of Denny Carter is supposedly taking place, so you'll have me and Lawrence both today and for the Thursday show, probably joined by a guest, one of our awesome writers on Thursday as well. So, Lawrence, it's the dead of summer. Literally nothing is happening, but Scott Fish has blessed us with something to talk about, which is the Scott Fish Bowl. For the handful of listeners who don't know, Scott Fish Bowl is a charity event that is leagues upon leagues upon leagues. Like, what is it, like 15 or 100 or so people in?
I think it's 3,000 now.
Shut up. It's so much bigger than I realized.
Yeah.
3,000 competitors, celebrities, fans, analysts, experts, novices, all competing within leagues that then, kind of like best ball, break out into these final rounds to crown a winner. The scoring, I was hoping you'd know because I have picks to make. It's typically super flex with really interesting, weird scoring quirks. I know the quarterbacks last year, and I think it's true this year, can really get punished for being like inefficient for, turnovers and stuff. So,
Yeah.
And that's something I love about Scott Fish just in general, is this format every year. It's typically super flex, or at least it's been for a few years, but it understands how to make that really interesting where, you don't always just like lock in that second flex or the super flex as a quarterback, because if you're locking in a truly like inefficient bad quarterback, you will get punished. So we are both like 2 rounds in, 2 picks in as well. So how did you start off? You had the 101?
Yeah. So I pretty much take the 1-on-1 every year to get my boy Lamar. And right after that, the quarterbacks just flew off the board. You're getting the pick number 7, 8, and we talking about Justin Fields here. You know what I'm saying? So it took until the latter parts of the first round for guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp to go. It got back around to me, my second pick. And remember, this is third round reversal. So if you have that 1-on-1 pick, you're not getting the back-to-back picks there. So I took Jonathan Taylor with my second pick. But like you mentioned, Kyle, the scoring makes it in such a way that you could get these quarterbacks and stack up on these quarterbacks. And that doesn't mean you're just going to run through your league like that. Like, you better get them tight ends, them receivers, and even those kickers in this league. He makes sure that the kickers matter. They're still not going to matter to me. I'm still going to draft all of the ballers that ball on the field on the actual plays. But it's cool, though, like you said, how they set up the scoring to make it so that each position is important.
Yeah, Justin Tucker slander aside, he's undoubtedly a baller, so I take a bit of exemption on behalf of Denny as well.
Yeah, I give you Justin Tucker. After that, you and Denny could kick rocks on that one. No pun intended.
I had the 112, and I did go Justin Fields, as you noted, that like he was the last quarterback I thought had that elite QB ceiling. He probably has like a scarier floor because like his sacks and his turnovers, if they persist, will get punished. But like Scott Fish Bowl, I'm not playing for floor. I don't care if he goes out and has a terrible year. I want to chase the year where he's a baller. So, and I think that's possible. I mean, I know it's possible. He's like one of the best rushers at quarterback we've ever seen, frankly. So, and then Cooper Kupp, I was just looking at the board. I saw a lot of quarterbacks go. I'm assuming it's super flex, and I saw some receivers go. I was like, sure, I'm going to take the good players. Let's not worry too much about the semantics of the scoring. This wasn't a $500 buy-in league. It's free. I'm going to take the good players and let things work themselves out.
You can experiment a little bit, and at the end of the day, if you make it far, it's like you get some, recognition, and then it's for a good cause too. So you know what I'm saying, man? It's all good fun, and at the end of the day, it's good to see everybody rally around it.
Yeah, it's a great time to be on Twitter, too. Is like the opening week of Scott Fish Bowl is a great time. Speaking of having fun, experimenting, it's the middle of summer, nothing's going on. So we're doing takes. This is an episode of just takes. We're doing our favorite overvalued and undervalued players. No sifting through news, but if you want to, check out the new site. But we're just doing takes. So, Lawrence, we both have 3. Apparently, I've been told by producer Adam, we have 1 overlapping player, but not that we agree on, that we disagree on. So give me your first of the... So I think we did a similar episode. So the second installment of Overvalued, Undervalued. Who's your first undervalued player going in drafts right now?
Yeah, and it's gonna sound crazy. We don't expect much out of these guys. It's a rookie quarterback, and I'm going Anthony Richardson here. I feel like once you get outside of those elite dual threat fantasy quarterbacks, we know them: Jalen Hurts, Lamar, Justin Fields, um, Deshaun Watson. I'm looking for him to bounce back. Once you get outside that tier of dual threat quarterbacks who are mostly all a threat to give you 800 to 1,000 rushing yards on the ground. Josh Allen as well. I failed to mention him. Once you get outside of this guy, you're sitting on a quarterback one with the potential points wise, as far as fantasy goes, could be in the mix with those other guys. Maybe because he's a rookie who's on not as good of a team with as good a roster, he'll have his rookie mistakes like they all do. Maybe turnovers are in play, but what's also going to be in play for Anthony Richardson is the big play. We saw what a guy like Jalen Hurts did last year in a similar offense that Anthony Richardson will be tasked with running here with Shane Steichen. Now, I consider this offense it'll be like the Eagles light, right? Because they don't have the AJ Browns, they don't have the Devontae Smith, but they got the Michael Pittmans and the Alec Pierces and the Josh Downs who should be more than manageable. And a lot of people have compared uh, um, Anthony Richardson to Cam Newton coming out. The size, the physique, the athleticism. I would say Anthony Richardson's a tad more athletic, more explosive, especially as a runner. And many people don't know that Cam Newton was the first rookie quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in the season. People don't know that, right? He was quarterback 3 that year in fantasy. Now the game has changed because the quarterbacks around him that season was Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady. None of those guys were running for 800 yards. So now you're surrounded by those guys, but still with the opportunity ahead of him, I could see him. Maybe he don't get to 4,000 yards per se, but I could definitely see around 3,000 to 3,500 passing yards. He definitely could go for those same 700 rushing yards that Cam Newton went for as a rookie, and double-digit rushing touchdowns are on the table.
Yeah, I love Richardson. I think he is my most drafted player in best ball right now. Like, I just don't, like you said, we've got the quarterback landscape has changed a little bit, but I almost don't see how he doesn't pay off as like a low end QB1 with elite high end QB1 ceiling. Because, like you talked about it, Cam Newton is one of the most athletic quarterbacks we've ever seen. Anthony Richardson probably is the most. I mean, by relative athletic score, he's a perfect 10.0. He is the highest RAS of any quarterback. He is like the size of Derrick Henry with 4.43 speed, like elite splits, great vertical, I mean, literally the best quarterback vertical in the history of the combine, the best broad in the history of the combine. He is elite running back level of athleticism with a cannon for an arm, and he plays a position where just that rushing alone makes it so easy for him to differentiate from the non-rushers that typically go in that back-end QB1 range. Like looking at taking him a little bit ahead of like a Kirk Cousins, spurging on him versus a Geno Smith. Those guys are fine. Good passers, good offenses. Like
Yeah.
this is the type of player that breaks fantasy, though. That's what we see when we get the best seasons from Jalen Hurts, from Lamar Jackson. The best games and seasons from Josh Allen is having that rushing component, a high-end rushing component, is how you break fantasy. Or you be like Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. That's the
Yeah. If I'm missing out on if I'm not having a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, Lamar, Jalen Hurts, all those guys, I'm gonna take Anthony Richardson over the Geno Smiths, over the Kirk Cousins, even over the Daniel Jones, who he has some rushing upside of his own. But look, we're talking about a quarterback that's getting drafted in double-digit rounds. This is the last year you're going to get that. So if you're in like a keeper league, a double-digit keeper league, double-digit round keeper league, like Anthony Richardson is a guy you definitely want to target in those rounds. I'm certainly doing so.
Yeah, even if he has like a bad passing season too, which is possible. Like he was inaccurate in college. Like he threw really deep, incredibly deep. So you expect him to be less like just completion percentage, raw completion percentage isn't going to exactly detail how he throws and what he's good at, but he struggled with accuracy at times in college. And we saw that this past year from Justin Fields. Like wasn't the best passer of the football. They needed to give him more weapons and they've tried to do that. But just the rushing alone guaranteed that he would be going in like in the 5th or 6th round, and that's what we're seeing. So even if I like the keeper or even dynasty example of even if the passing doesn't work out, it takes some time to get there. The rushing alone is just going to mean that next year, year over year, his ADP is going to rise. Like he is a good bet to increase or sustain like dynasty keeper type of value. So I love this pick. It obviously supports something I believe. So of course I'm going to say it's a great pick for me. My first undervalued player is Tony Pollard, the RB7, 22nd overall. I just don't get the only thing I believe people are afraid of to not take him at the 1-2 turn is the return of Zeke, which it's possible. Like Jerry Jones has alluded to this. I mean, he's not going to be expensive because there's clearly not much of a market for him. So I vaguely get that concern. But if we clear that hurdle or another veteran running back hurdle, you're looking at, I think, frankly, one of the best running backs of the past 5 or so years in the NFL in a workhorse role. I mean, since entering the league, Pollard ranks 1st in yards after contact per carry, 4th in missed tackles forced per carry, 3rd in just plain yards per carry, and 5th in explosive run rate. He, like, we talk about Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor as you fantasy analysts whenever they take, like, Najee Harris. They're like, I know he's not great. Nick Chubb, best pure runner, but we got to get the fantasy points. I think we can just do both with Tony Pollard because Tony Pollard has the catching pass prowess. Now he'll have the goal line role because they're not going to give that to Malik Davis or Deuce Vaughn. And he has the contention for best pure runner. You can have your cake and eat it too with Tony Pollard. Please don't tell me this is the one you disagree on. How do we feel about this one?
Nah, from a fantasy standpoint, I don't disagree with it all. I actually don't feel like he's undervalued or overvalued. I feel like right now it's just right. Because when we're talking about fantasy, well, he was already inside the top 10 running backs last season with Zeke, taking a lot of those touchdowns. Zeke scored double-digit touchdowns, matter of fact. And I think it's like you said, the main thing we're waiting on, and he'll be one of the biggest movers as far as the ADP go, just based on whether or not Zeke returns. It would be really hard for me to believe that they will go another route as far as veterans, like going Fournette or Kareem Hunt. So if it's Zeke, you're losing possibly 8 to 10 touchdowns. So, other than that, man, if it's as is, I mean, yeah, you can't say he doesn't have a top 5 upside as a fantasy running back because who else they gonna get a ball to? Like Deuce Vaughn can work his way in there to give him a breather. I love him as a player, as a football player, but Tony Pollard will be that guy. The question will be, do they want him touching the ball 20 plus times? He's been mostly efficient up until this point in his career. So it's hey, Zeke, we waiting on you, dog.
Please, Zeke. Anywhere else? I have way too much Pollard in best ball, and I think these are out so I can show them. Cover boy, we need this Pollard. We not only me.
Well, last year the cover guy on our draft guide was Jalen Hurts, and he went off. So if that's any indication, then it might just be Tony Pollard's season.
I think it is an indication. You have a running back undervalued on your list, Lawrence. Who is up next?
Yeah, so that's gonna be Aaron Jones for me, man. I think he's seems to be a forgotten man, mainly because his buddy Aaron, came over here to New Jersey to join the Jets. But when I look at this, and I'm also not counting the Packers out of that division. That's just a side note. I think that division's wide open, mainly because you got Jordan Love there, right? When I saw Jordan Love play, he didn't play scared. Now, but on the other hand, you have this offense with a new young quarterback in here. Who's this offense going to depend on? They're going to depend on the most veteran player on that offense outside of Bakhtiari, who hardly plays on the offensive line. They're going to depend on Aaron Jones, and I'm liking him over guys like Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, who we don't know is the deal with his injury. I'd even look at him, taking him over a guy like Joe Mixon. He's coming off a year where he had a career best 1,121 rushing yards on the ground, like literally a career best year he just had. in a year where the Packers weren't good, coming off a season where he caught 59 passes. Like, that's plenty good. Like, we'll take that. There was literally 8 running backs rather, that scored more fantasy points than Aaron Jones last season, but he's going as the RB17 right now. So I'm liking him more around that, flirting with that RB1 range, because why? He was running back 12 on a points per game basis last year. So if I could, if I could get him, I feel like I'm getting like kind of a steal, especially him going running back 17. And I think it's because Aaron Rodgers isn't there no more. I think it's like Tony Pollard is where he is because we don't know what Zeke is going to do. Aaron Rodgers right now, he kind of dropped a little bit in the eyes of, I don't know, fantasy players, gurus, and managers all over the world because Aaron Rodgers is gone. But I'm liking that. I'm liking that value there.
You know, it's funny. I was looking at my best ball rankings, which you can find on the site, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a bit lower than ADP on Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones currently going 53rd overall, RB17." And I was like, "Oh, well, why is that?" I think to me, one, the funny thing is that I also have him RB17. The reason of why that is not that I don't like him relative to the running backs. I'm apparently, and this is true in my actual best ball drafts, taking receivers over him there. But actually, as far as running backs go, I think he's perfectly fine. Like you said, we've seen him clear this RB17 benchmark of his ADP right now pretty consistently. The one obvious concern, like you noted, is Jordan Love and the lack of Aaron Rodgers, 2-time MVP. The 2-time back-to-back before 2022, 4-time total, right?
Yeah.
I'm a little scared of how things are going to go with Jordan Love at the helm. We saw last year, I think the offense really struggled with the lack of Davante Adams and an unclear target share. You're going to need Christian Watson to step up. Maybe they can get something out of Jaden Reed. I don't love what they're doing at tight end. I think they're a team that looks somewhat to be rebuilding. I mean, they're starting what will essentially be a rookie quarterback. He hasn't taken a start in week 1 yet. So rookie quarterback or de facto rookie quarterback, rookie or second year players at every receiver position, almost certainly at tight end, unless they start Josiah Deguara. So I'm not optimistic on the potential success of Jordan Love because you just don't see guys spend this much time on the bench and then come out and have success. Ironically, the one glaring example of a guy to do this was just his mentor in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And the other thing is beyond just the overall touchdown output of the offense, the touchdown output for the backfield specifically skews heavily towards A.J. Dillon. Last year, A.J. Dillon out-carried Aaron Jones 10-3 inside the 5-yard line. He had a slightly positive fantasy points over expected on those. Aaron Jones, I don't think he scored a single touchdown on any of his inside the 5 carries. That makes sense. Dillon, I don't know if you've seen him, but his quads are giant. Of course, you're going to use him when you need to gain specifically 2 or 3 yards. And then on the other hand, Aaron Jones does that thing he does really well, where he breaks incredibly long runs at a clip that you wouldn't think is sustainable. But that means that he doesn't get those short yardage work. So I would say I'm concerned about his touchdown output. I'm concerned about the offense, but only in that it makes me want to take the receivers there more. Relative to the other running backs, I think he's a perfectly fine value.
Yeah, didn't score a lot of touchdowns. Only scored 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground, which makes it even more crazy that he did finish as an RB1 on a points per game basis.
Moving on to my next one, I realized as I'm doing this, I'm taking good players. Do you always feel this good when you're just like, I think these guys are good, we should draft them? Because I'm digging in the numbers. I'm like, oh, Chris Olave looks to be really good. What if Michael Thomas comes back and hurts his target share? Don't care. What about the quarterback play? Derek Carr wasn't great last year. Did you see the quarterbacks the Saints were trotting out last year? Can we please, and this is somehow I've evolved into let's play the best plays kind of guy. Can we just take the good players? Chris Olave, as a rookie, had the 6th highest target share of any rookie wide receiver since 2013. The guys just ahead of him, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase. The guys just below him, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham. Getting up in the higher echelon of target share, just straight up target share as a rookie, is a benchmark for players who are future stars. That's not particularly surprising. The guys who get on the field and get the ball at the age of 21, 22, they just keep doing that. You see the same thing in rookie yards per route run, where he, since 2013, over the past decade, has the 4th highest yards per route run, just edged out Jamar Chase, just behind one of my favorites, a very what could have been, Martavis Bryant, but then also just behind Justin Jefferson and Odell Beckham. The guys who are good as rookies are just going to keep being good. Mostly. That is mostly true. He's going to get a quarterback upgrade. The offense will be better as a whole. And he's going right now at a spot where I think, I'm just windmilling the elite talent. He goes to the wide receiver 12, 19 overall. I'm just going to windmill the elite talent in an upgraded situation. I don't think the Saints are going to be great, but they're still better off with Derek Carr than they were last year. Like, let's take the good players. At some point we're going to reach the players that we disagree on.
Well, I always draft good players in fantasy football because I know who the good players are. I likely always know who the good players are in football. So in the case of Chris Olave, Derek Carr was bad last year, right? To his standards, at least. But Devontae Adams still produced 1,500 receiving yards, was still an elite fantasy option, and that's what happens. When you're a very talented guy. Josh Jacobs out of the backfield had a career year himself. So you had a top running back and a top receiver, but nobody was starting Derek Carr. It's almost amazing that this happened for him. I'm with you on the whole Michael Thomas thing. I think doesn't matter what the team does. Michael Thomas could get his too. To be honest, he could get his too. They'll throw the ball plenty enough, especially with Derek Carr there. The only thing about Chris Olave is it's just so many good receivers. Like, you're not mad at, like, if you draft a certain way and you just starting out you're letting the draft fall to you and you're drafting a couple of running backs and you get to the 3rd, 4th round and Chris Olave starts off as your top receiver, I wouldn't be mad at that, especially considering you got 2 of the top running backs in the draft. Otherwise, I'd like him as a wide receiver 2 on my team behind one of the top guys, rather, like a Tyreek Hill, a CD Lamb. Make those kind of pairs together, and I think you're working with something. But like you say, clearing over 1,000 yards with Andy Dalton, not mad at that at all. I will never deny a fantasy player because of their talent. That's what I won't do, and he got it.
All right, let's play the game. We have 3 receivers going just after pick 15 on Underdog. Who are you taking over Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, or Devonta Smith?
Oh, so I'm gonna go Jalen Waddle, and then that one I would go Olave second, and then Devonta Smith. Olave is the number 1 outright on that team. Devonta Smith puts up pretty damn near close to number 1 numbers, but their numbers are similar. But give me the guy who put up 1,000 yards and missed 4 games.
I think I go Olave here. I know I go Olave. I take
over Waddle.
And over Devonta, but over Waddle too.
Ooh, interesting.
I have them ranked back to back in my best ball rankings, which is contrary to ADP, where actually I have a little bit of running back gap between them too, which is contrary to ADP. So I am out on a limb here. Not as much Waddle fade, more so Olave, very bullishness. Lawrence, who is what will be your third and final undervalued player in the dead middle of summer?
Yeah, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, man. Still a, solid player. This is more of a situation where, again, if I'm starting out with the running backs here and I could get Marquise Brown as, my wide receiver 3 when I've already waited on receivers, this is where I'm just going to have to go. And, and it's not even because of what he did the first 6 games. When DeAndre Hopkins was out, he was wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis. I would actually say this: if it ends up being Colt McCoy starting off the season, he wasn't good with Colt McCoy last season, averaging 4 catches and under 35 yards in those games. However, DeAndre Hopkins was, but DeAndre Hopkins is not here no more. So I'm just banking on that. Not a player I would draft too much higher over his ADP, which is wide receiver 31. I wouldn't let him creep into that wide receiver 2 territory, but there's a nice little sweet spot where I'd like to have him if he's my wide receiver 3, and I've waited a little bit, or I might have got 2 wide receiver studs off the bat. Maybe I went CD Lamb, AJ Brown back to back, got a couple of running backs, drafted Kyle Pitts because we all know I'm going to do that, drafted Lamar because we all know I'm going to do that. Then Marquise Brown comes around with they'll be losing, and throwing, and him and Greg Dortch will be catching those passes. So somebody got to do it. Somebody has to, reap those benefits. And the guy who's been proven to do it the most on that team over the past year is Hollywood Brown.
He's the one player that I had on my overvalued list. So I will give the bull case on the second half of the show. I won't do my rebuttal now, but and it's not too much of a Hollywood indictment. This offense is going to be scary until we get Kyler back, and maybe even afterwards. But I am not looking forward to the first time Pat tells me I have to watch and blurb a Cardinals game in the first month of the season. So,
well, you'll look forward to it if you draft Marquise Brown. You'll be watching it then. Let me ask you this: Is there players that you just go into a draft and say, I'm not drafting him no matter what?
No, I have Marquise Brown significantly below his ADP in my best ball rankings, but I certainly take him. Yeah, I'm well below his ADP, but players fall below their ADP all the time. So I have some Marquise teams. He also, for the best ball sickos, plays in a pretty fun game versus the Eagles in week 17. So when that final round comes around, and this is for all the money, essentially, he's not a player I want to have 0 of. He can absolutely break the slate in week 17. He can do that at any point. I'm just not sure we'll see a ton of it until Kyler comes back. So I have some Marquise Brown teams, but not nearly as much as the average drafter. So I am concerned. We'll get to my concerns later. But no, I still take even every player that I say is overvalued. I will probably have a few best ball teams hanging around with them on. Not many, but It certainly happens. My last player, I was worried any of my undervalued players would be someone you think is overvalued, and that didn't happen. It went the other way. And
maybe this is the one. Maybe this is another one that we don't know yet.
Oh, that'd be terrifying because this player is so good. George Kittle, another one. I'm just going to take the best players, but we're getting such a discount on the best players because people are so tied up in the micro analysis of George Kittle's splits with Brock Purdy, with the other receivers on the field, that they miss the fact that he goes 62nd overall in drafts right now as the tight end 4. He has the highest single season yards per route run among tight ends since 2013. He also has the 3rd best season and the 4th best season, with only Mark Andrews sneaking in there, breaking up his trifecta of the top 3. He also has, since 2013, the 1st, 4th, and 5th most receiving yards in a game. I mean, even versus Travis Kelce, not that this is an indictment of Kelce, this is an acclaim to George Kittle's greatness. He is the most efficient on a per route run basis consistently, and he has the biggest spike weeks of any tight end in terms of overall receiving yards in the NFL, and he does them more often than anyone else. And they're letting us get him in the 60s. I mean, come on, this is robbery here. I think elite tight end, when you don't have to pay elite tight end prices, is a really strong strategy this year. And to the Denny Carters out there, he has poisoned our minds saying we don't want our tight ends to block. It is perfectly fine to look at a highlight of George Kittle pancaking someone and say that's a good thing because last year he ran 3% fewer routes on his passing plays than Travis Kelce. He gets to stay out there and block every now and then, but he's still running a ton of routes. He was like the 4th or 5th most routes in the NFL. He's elite. He's cheaper than ever. Talk me off of taking George Kittle in at every draft because I do a lot of that right now.
Again, I'm not gonna be the one to talk you off that. And I don't know what Denny talking about. We want our tight ends blocking because we want them on the field. We want our running backs blocking too. Nah, man. I mean, I don't even this just off the top of my head. This dude went 9 for 181 and 2 touchdowns in the game last year. I'll wait it out. I'll start him every week, just waiting for that game because I know it's going to happen. The quarterback situation in his case, I think that affects his ADP, but it doesn't affect what I'm thinking because he's gotten it done with every quarterback he's played with, all the way back to CJ Beathard at Iowa, who came with him to the 49ers, Jimmy G, Nick Mullins, now Brock Purdy. We ain't seen him do nothing crazy with Trey Lance yet, but we ain't seen Trey Lance play. So, but I'm going to assume that if, he end up being a dude that's in there, I don't know that he is. I think it's going to be Brock Purdy, which will probably be better for George Kittle from a fantasy perspective. So, yeah, definitely. This is I would say pay a little higher on George Kittle than wait another couple rounds or another round for Darren Waller simply because it's the better player. And again, I'm not gonna deny the fantasy player because I just want the good players. Like you said something about some in-depth analysis. I ain't getting into all that. I know he catch ball, run with ball, score with ball. Give me George Kittle. Nah, I'm not gonna disagree with you with that. No, sir.
Yeah, I'm fine with the micro analysis on like ambiguous situations. Oh, I don't know if this player is good. Like, let me look at like his yards per out run, look at the film or whatever. But like, we are so definitive that George Kittle is not only good, but like truly is one of the best tight ends of the 2000s. And they're giving us a discount on him. So absolutely, I'm just going to keep taking this guy. And like you said, with the quarterback situation, maybe people are viewing this as like a very high risk of like Trey Lance starts a lot and is bad. Not seeing that Trey Lance could start and be good. Or more importantly, that signs on Brock Purdy have all been consistently positive. I don't know that he starts week 1, but I think the really bad scenarios where he misses like a month or more to start the season, I don't want to say they're ruled out, but at least has trended in the right direction. And he's definitely the starter. Both I think Schefter and Ian Rappaport have said they view him as the number one. He's the clear starter when healthy. And I think that's better overall for it. It's probably better for the offense, but it's definitely better for the pass catchers just for their receiving production. So I think quarterback looks relatively good. There's some risk here, but I think it's way more.
I mean, the same thing, Kyle, is happening to Debo right now. I actually should have put him instead of Hollywood as my undervalued player. But again, people are going to see that all Brock Purdy got to do is get these good players. The game that Brock Purdy came in against the Dolphins, where Jimmy G got hurt, he went straight to Debo. He was feeding Debo. People are gonna realize that, like, hey, Kittle, Debo, it's kind of the same thing. You're getting discounts on both of them now, but for Debo, it's kind of a mixture of the quarterback situation and the fact that so many receivers are just coming up and being the outright top target on their teams.
Yeah, I totally agree. Before we get into all of our overvalued players, each of which we have 3 for, want to let you know the best way to watch baseball. The Giants face the Pirates once more in Pittsburgh this week. Both teams hope to move up in their divisions, but only one can rise Sunday morning. Watch MLB Sunday Leadoff live at 11:30 Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. Lawrence, who's your favorite player on either the San Francisco Giants or the Pittsburgh Pirates? Because I actually do know, being a Pittsburgh raised, or at least raised by Yinzers, true Pittsburgh parents, I can name a ton of Pittsburgh players. Can you name a player on either of these teams? I make Denny do this every show, and it's always a good time.
Does Andrew McCutchen play for them?
Yes, he does. I think at some point he left to get the bag, and then eventually came back. And I think
he back. Good. See, I didn't even know he left. Yeah. I didn't even know he left. I was just shooting from half court right there. There you go. And Andrew McCutchen there. Don't ask for no more because I don't know.
I think that's already possibly better than Denny has fared. He's probably batting less than 500, where I've only played this game with you once, and you're batting 1,000, and we'll keep
So
it that way.
I
Yep.
like the average. I like the average.
All right, moving into our overvalued players. Lawrence, who is your first man up?
Justin, I almost said Jefferson. Definitely not Justin Jefferson. He is correctly valued, but it's gonna be Justin Herbert for me, man. From a fantasy perspective, from a real football perspective, I just feel like, fans and media and fantasy players. So this is not Justin Herbert's fault. It's the fans, the media, the fantasy players. We are wanting him to be something that he is not yet. At least he's not that yet. Now, his first couple years, he lit it up from a fantasy perspective. Took a dip last year, went to quarterback 15 on a points per game basis. Now I'm all cool with saying he could bounce back. However, what has drastically changed to, make us believe that, especially with the other quarterbacks that we got out there who could pick up some yards on the ground? You drafted Quentin Johnston. Now, I've heard folks say that, hey, Quentin Johnson, he's ready to go right now. So is Keenan Allen chopped liver? Is Mike Williams chopped liver? I know they be hurt sometimes, especially Mike Williams, but what has drastically changed? Oh, the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who's supposed to be all airing it out and stuff like this. Dak Prescott was 12th in the league in check down percentage. That's pretty high. Justin Herbert himself was second in check down percentage and led the league in check downs last season. So you may get some new plays. You may get a new play caller calling the plays. But Kellen Moore can't go inside Justin Herbert's brain and make him start throwing the ball deep. He got Austin Eckler right there. Are we going to take away from Austin Eckler? Because he just had a career high 127 targets. Now, I don't expect him to see that number again, but are you going to cut that in half to start throwing the ball deep? I don't know. So if Justin Herbert does play to the ADP of quarterback seven, hell no. Look, if he plays to that ADP, somebody else like Austin Eckler has to suffer, right? If we're airing the ball out, then Austin Eckler, that'll be tough for him to be the RB2 or the RB3 in fantasy football. So, I'll straight up rather have Anthony Richardson in fantasy than Justin Herbert in fantasy in 2023. Just a little bit. That's overvalued for me, man, especially based on what he done last year and what the Chargers think they've done to correct that. We're going on offensive coordinator number 3 for Justin Herbert.
There was 10 spots in there where I'm like, this is a perfect clip. Someone clip this, put it on social. These are perfect.
Hey, they gonna be mad.
I'm a little tepid on Justin Herbert too. I don't think I'm as scared as you are, but I think I have him slightly below ADP in terms of my best ball rankings, and I don't find myself taking him all that often. The only thing that really scares me is I think he's got an incredible ceiling. I mean, we already saw it 2 years ago when he topped 5,000 yards and threw 38 touchdowns. Now he's getting a first round receiver. Now he's getting what I think should be a pretty strong offensive coordinator upgrade. I can see the path in which he just posts an absolutely crazy season. Do I think it's all that likely? I don't think so. It's probably why I don't draft him as much. But I will say it scares me to be light on Justin Herbert. I am light on him, but I could see a season where he goes out and I can see him exceeding that 5,038. He's already done it once, and he's in maybe a better situation. But I agree. The flip side of the coin is he wasn't known as the highlight reel, deep ball chucking quarterback coming out of college. He was known as game manager plus. I think
he can do it. He has that arm, but that's just not. He don't do that. Those 5,000 yards he throw for. He throws the ball 40 times a game. That's not an exaggeration. That's literally the average that he's thrown it a game the past 2 years, 40. So it's like, yeah, you better throw for 5,000 yards then.
Yeah, I totally agree. Moving on to my next undervalued player, Najee Harris, RB12, 37th overall. I've seen people say like, oh, well, he really started to pick things up when he got the plate taken out of his foot. And he did get better, but I mean, his numbers were still rough. I believe, got it removed before week 6. And from week 6 onward, he was 31st in yards after contact per attempt, 44th in breakaway percentage, 38th in plain old yards per carry, 25th in PFF rushing grade. These are overvalued. Producer Adam said I misspoke. These are overvalued players in that you could maybe tell because I'm reading you some concerning stats on Najee Harris. And going back to what I know Denny is screaming at his podcast players, like, I don't care if he's good. He's going to get the ball a lot. I'm a little concerned that not that he doesn't lead this backfield in carries and probably lead it in targets, but that Jaylen Warren is good enough to put him into the sort of territory we saw with Zeke over the past few years, where in 2020 and 2021, Tony Pollard was very obviously more efficient than Zeke. He did not get the ball nearly as much as Zeke, but with Zeke's efficiency struggling, you needed Zeke to get all of the carries and all of the targets because that was just the volume times efficiency, and his cost mandated that happen. And we already saw this happen last year with Jaylen Warren taking targets off the table of Najee Harris and the offense moving on from Big Ben to pushing the ball farther downfield and not only checking it down. I'm just not sure we get the absurd snap share, a ton of targets, or all of the carries that you need, or Najee needs to be more efficient just to pay off his cost. I think what he does makes sense for an NFL team. I don't know if it's been a first round pick on it, but from a fantasy perspective, I'm not taking the efficiency of him or the lack of every single touch. One of those has to give, or I'm not taking him at cost. So I don't take much Najee these days.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that because I'm on par with that. Most of my concern is what the same concern you have for Aaron Jones is, except it's even more so here. I don't think the quarterback situation is ideal. I actually mentioned Najee earlier as one of the guys that I wouldn't take over Aaron Jones. So there you go.
Yeah, moving on. Who is your next overvalued fantasy player?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Dameon Pierce here, who had a good rookie season as a rusher. The problem is they've brought in Devin Singletary, and I think people aren't talking about that enough. Dameon Pierce as a rookie, 2 catches per game. So bringing in Devin Singletary, a guy who's averaged almost 40 catches per game the last 3 seasons, it lets me know that he's going to have at least that type of role. You don't come from your situation with the Bills and come to the Texans unless otherwise. So I think he's being a bit overvalued as some workhorse back when we could see an experienced Devin Singletary get some work there.
Yeah, I have him slightly behind ADP in my best ball rankings too, so I'm not pushing back on this at all. Pierce going as RB22, ADP of 69. I think he's probably a far better real life player than the fantasy output you get from him. One, because he's on a team that I don't expect to score many touchdowns. And 2, he breaks a ton of tackles. And this is something that actually Najee did once he got the plate removed from his foot. If you believe that split matters, it probably does, but it is a small sample thing. Najee did break a lot more tackles when he was, supposedly trending toward being healthy, but that didn't result in more long runs. It didn't result in a significantly higher or above league average yards per carry. It's flashy, but for him and for Dameon Pierce, who's an extreme tackle breaker, but he ran at like 4.3 yards per carry last year. It's flashy, and I think it's useful at converting probably short carries into slightly less short carries or tackles behind the line of scrimmage to at the line of scrimmage. But for the tackle breaker to really matter for fantasy, they got to break the tackle and then go yard, which is why, like Alvin Kamara, in his prime at least, you cared about the tackle breaking because it meant he was extremely efficient on a per-touch basis for fantasy purposes. For us, like, the broken tackles for Dameon Pierce are nice, but he didn't get in the end zone. He didn't break a 40-yard run on that play. So I don't know. And I agree, he's not catching passes. I think Devin Singletary will absolutely get used in that role. And I love taking Devin Singletary. It's just a ugly 0 RB. Put some points on this roster. So I agree that Dameon Pierce is not a player I find on too many of my rosters. DK Metcalf is also a player I find on very few of my rosters, going wide receiver 15, 29th overall. We do this every year. We do it with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. We do it with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I don't know why we choose the players we choose to do this with, but like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are pretty close to being like similar fantasy output, similar usage, and yet we every year steam DK Metcalf up to nearly a wide receiver 1. He goes 3 picks after the wide receiver 1 threshold, and plummet Lockett to this year wide receiver 33. Last year, Metcalf was 16th in weighted opportunity rating, just mixing his air yard share and his target share. Lockett was 24th. Yeah, Metcalf gets the ball a little bit more. Totally fair. Does he get it enough more to justify wide receiver 15 versus wide receiver 33? I cannot get behind this. Also, DK Metcalf has outscored Tyler Lockett once in 4 seasons. He's more efficient, but he's not getting the ball that much more to justify the gap between him and Lockett. I don't hate DK Metcalf at cost, but I just don't get how we always find ourselves with immense Tyler Lockett value. And I don't even think it's like the Brandon Cooks thing where he always outplays his ADP by like 3 spots and you get the littlest win.
Right.
Lockett has huge spike week upside and consistently crushes his ADP. So I'm taking all the Lockett, and I, in turn, haven't had much DK.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why that is why we always end up drafted DK Metcalf ahead of Tyler Lockett. Well, look at them. Look at the 2 guys.
Fair enough.
One is big, swole, 6-pack, running 10-3 and 100 meters, could run down Buda Baker from 100 yards behind him. You know, he's got a functioning hairline, whereas the Tyler Lockett does not. You know what I'm saying? So those are the reasons why. And then at the same time, they both like 1,100-yard receivers. So, you know what I'm saying? That's why the optics, the physics of the situation. That's why Justin Herbert is overvalued as well. Tall, long hair, it's part of the game.
Fair enough. And I get it. Like I see videos of you doing like intense looking workouts that you post on Twitter, and you look at me and you're like, I can tell he has bad allergies. You just look at him and you're like, he shouldn't be outside. So when we go to Canton for the Fantasy Expo, I get why you're on the field and I'm not. Totally understand.
But see, people will be sadly mistaken when you go out there and we get to play more than 2 plays, Denny. When you go out there, Kyle, and you catch 6 passes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and me, I'm just out there blocking because we know Denny ain't gonna throw me the ball. So people will be surprised at what you could do when you go out there on the field, Kyle.
My route running is pretty nice. I will admit,
Yeah.
I'm shifty. I'm not long speed, but I'm shifty.
I'm just a practice All-American.
Speaking of surprises, your next one will probably surprise me because I didn't ask you beforehand. Who is your next and I believe final undervalued player or overvalued?
Yeah.
I keep saying that. Overvalued player.
Diontae Johnson. And just like we have the same story with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf every year, the same story about Diontae Johnson every year is the targets. Man, he got all these targets last year. Target. Call him Mr. Target. Look, he's averaged 153 targets the past 3 years. That's a whopping number. 153 targets. But yet he's turned that into the same average over the past 3 years to 93 catches and 988 yards. He did have the 1 year, a couple of years ago, where he finished as the wide receiver 8, just getting over 1,000, just a little bit. So Diontae Johnson always gonna get the target, but at what point, from a fantasy perspective, do he got to show up? I actually think Buddy could ball for real, but from a fantasy perspective, at what point does he have to show us? He got a quarterback that just threw 7 TDs and 9 interceptions. Not to say that he can't improve, but that's what happened. You got a guy in George Pickens who catches anything once per game. He makes the best catch in NFL history. So you got that ADP to battle with there. I just think it's a little bit overvalued because of the targets. And while targets are good, you have to see something. You have to see some glimpse of production with those targets in the previous year to come to this year and be like, oh, he just left it on the table. The guy didn't score a touchdown. The whole thing we was talking about last year was how many catches he had without scoring a touchdown. That's extremely hard to do. So, I think it's just a little, I don't, again, I'll never say I'm not going to draft a player, but he'd have to get pretty low, for him to end up on my fantasy roster.
I think I probably take him more than you do because I don't know if you know this, but he gets a lot of targets is the thing.
Yeah, I heard.
One of these days he'll do something. He'll like get the ball. Well, first he'll catch it. One of these days he'll catch one of the targets and then he'll run forward to gain more yards after the catch. We're still waiting to see what that looks like. He maybe finds his way into the end zone. We don't also know what that looks like. Maybe that happens one day, but I do think it's totally possible, as you kind of pointed out, that like George Pickens could be really good. Diontae Johnson's a good target earner. I'm not sure that like he would be a number one receiver for every team. And I'm not sure he'll be a number one receiver for this team. Like Pickens was strong in yards per route run. He was fine as a rookie. He was like around league average. He got on the field a ton and he like surprisingly put up 800 yards in a situation that was like dreadful for offensive production. And just 800 yards alone puts him in the upper echelon of like day 2 picks in their rookie years. Like those guys typically, as I pointed out earlier, go on to find success. So I could see George Pickens taking a significant amount of targets off the table for Diontae if Diontae doesn't find a way to boost his efficiency, because that's probably just what's naturally going to happen. My last guy, the rebuttal to Marquise Brown. I think Marquise Brown is overvalued going as the wide receiver 31. I am terrified of what this offense is going to look like. Colt McCoy, 27th in completion percent over expected last year, 46th in EPA per play. He had the second lowest air yards per attempt. And that is something Marquise Brown thrives on, is being the outside deep speed guy. I think this means a ton of targets for Greg Dortch and Rondale Moore specifically. I think they'll probably have to share essentially a starting slot role. I think Rondale Moore wins it, and I like Rondale Moore as a PPR scam, as Pat would call him. And I'm concerned that just the offense overall is somewhat dreadful. And Marquise Brown has never been a player who thrived on efficiency on a per route basis. So of course I think he's obviously out there running all the routes. But in the past 3 years, he's ranked 50th, 52nd, and 51st in yards per route run. He's good. And I think I am the reason I take him, even though I have him below ADP, I'm not so far below that he's a do not draft guy for me. The reason that is, as you pointed out, is that whenever DeAndre Hopkins wasn't there, he was elite at earning targets. And I can't say that I can't say, oh, Diontae Johnson earned targets without saying that admittedly, Marquise Brown probably earns a lot of targets sans DeAndre Hopkins. So that's why I still consider taking him, though I do take him far less, even less than I take Diontae. So
I would easily take Marquise Brown over Diontae Johnson. What say you?
Nah, I'll take Diontae.
What? Look, Marquise Brown at least scored a couple of touchdowns with his targets. Diontae Johnson, it took him a whole season to get 800 yards. Hollywood got 712 games. And we sprinkled some Colt McCoy in there, a lot of Colt McCoy in there, matter of fact. So
way too much Colt McCoy. Way too much Colt McCoy in there.
Yeah. I dig it though.
All right. That wraps it up. That's 3 overvalued, 3 undervalued for each of us. One split between you, the listener, has to decide who made the more persuasive argument and go out and do or don't draft Diontae Johnson. Lawrence, you got anything coming out these days? Team previews, other articles, shows?
Yeah, just look out for the team previews from all of us. Also, we got our draft guide that's about to drop as well, too. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, subscribe to the Rotoworld Football Show. All the team previews are coming out pretty much, I think, every day. I know we're getting into some of Denny's. I stacked all mine early. I didn't want to be worried about these in July. So all of mine are already out if you want to check those out.
Smart man.
Yeah, I think Rams and Packers are my most recent ones. Subscribe to the show. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you again on Thursday.